So I've had a few friends ask me about V-Ray and kind of where to get started if you were to get into it. And so there's a lot of tutorials online. There's a lot of tutorials that go in depth, all kinds of miscellaneous things. But I want to make a tutorial for my buddies. However, I'll share it with the rest of the world, if you will. And this is kind of like a basics to V-Ray for 3D Studio Max. So if you were to just install it right now and you're clueless about where to begin, render settings, things like that, this is kind of just my opinionated, informative tutorial, if you will. So first and foremost, you want to switch the render engine to V-Ray if you haven't yet. So press F10 and this render dialog comes up. Where it says render, you go click on that and just change it to V-Ray, whatever version you have. So I have version 7 hotfix 1. Now, there's only a few things that I personally change. So you go to the V-Ray tab. I don't do progressive, so I go bucket. Then min shading rate. That's kind of like if you hover over it, it'll give you a very informative thing of what it does. All I know is when I do rough renders, I change it to 1. Min and max subdivision 1 and 4. Noise threshold 0.1. And I always check lock noise pattern simply because I do a lot of animations. And then under GI, I leave it at default, done. And then if I do animations, I just change this from still to animation and done. I don't really change many settings here. But anyhow, this is in a nutshell the settings that I adjust based on my workflow for starting off test renders. So that's step one, low res quick render settings. Now what I also do is in common output, I just do HDTV just when I'm dialing in materials, things like that. It's just for my monitor, this is a very comfortable viewport layout. Now let's say you go to final. All I do is typically to 8.008 and maybe bump this up to 4. That's it. That's all I change from low res to final. Now, if I have some scenes that are really noisy or whatever, then I'll probably bump this up to like 12. The higher this bottom number goes, the longer the render times go. So for the moment, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, or 1, 4.1. So there we go. That's in a nutshell the basics of V-Ray. And bucket size, when you're rendering, there's like little squares that represent each CPU core. The smaller it is, the smaller the buckets, the larger the buckets. 48 seems to be nice as a default layout. So now, there's things about V-Ray. If you install the latest one, if you right click, there's no V-Ray frame buffer. So you have to add this manually. And the way I do this is well, this is the only way to do it, unless there's like scripts or whatever. You just go to customize, you go to quads, I believe, yep. And then see where it says category. I believe here you just go to V-Ray, and then no, it will be the other one for group. For group, we go to V-Ray, and it's this one. It says displays the last rendered VFB, and you just drag and drop it right over here. So see, I already have it, so nothing's gonna happen. But what this does is when you right click and you press V-Ray VFB, this is the V-Ray frame buffer. Whenever you're rendering, this is where your content appears. So if you want to work real time and dial in materials, lighting, things like that, where it sees this little teapot with a green plus symbol or play symbol, you just press that, and this will turn on V-Ray RT. So there we go, it's on. I have no light sources, thus it's black. So now, let me turn that off for the moment. We'll kind of go over the V-Ray lights and the camera. So V-Ray has their own camera properties. I don't use that. I use just the physical 3D Max camera. So I'll just create a camera in top viewport and then just set it up. And then to go into the camera, you just click this little thing that says perspective and you just select your camera. And these work in how your normal camera lens information is. So I'll just change this to 55 and just leave it as is for the moment. So there we go. We'll just zoom in and frame the car in frame. So then we have V-Ray lights. You have V-Ray Sun, which is, as you would assume, a sun system. Sky and sun system like the default on 3D Max. This is the V-Ray version. Then you have like a V-Ray IES if you load IES files, and then these other options. So the one that I usually use is just the V-Ray light. And they have different types of options. Again, lots of write-ups, documents on this, but in a nutshell, there's plain, which is a square, flat 2D light source. a dome, which is like your V-Ray HDRI, a sphere, which is a sphere light, a mesh light, which allows you to take any geometry and make it a actual light source. So if you want to have this whole car be a light source, you do mesh and you select the car body and it'll make it. And then disk is kind of like a 2D plane, but in a disk shape form. So if I'm doing studio strobe lighting, for example, I'll use disk. If I'm using like studio softbox lighting, I use plane. If I'm doing environmental HDRI renders, I use dome. And then spheres, sometimes I use this in studio shots, not often. I usually use these if I want to have like a light source illuminated, like a light post, things like that, where you would actually have like a light bulb that's round. So those are the light sources. So what we'll just do is create a plane overhead, like a big studio softbox, if you will. Now I'm going to right click VFP or VFB and press play. So as you can see, now we have a preview. So 30 is the multiplier by default, and it actually may be 1, I don't remember. But what I do know is if you press 8, here under V-Ray exposure controls, this is like your shutter speed, your camera adjustments. I changed it to photographic, and these are the settings I use by default. I've been doing this for years and years and years. So that's my workflow. This is a very opinionated thing. You do whatever you want. This is what I do. So now we have our light source. So now, in a nutshell, the last kind of thing of V-Ray is the materials. If you press M, it opens up your material library. I'll drag it over on the monitor so you can see it. So originally, if you start up 3D Max, it's in slate mode. I hate this mode. I started 3D Max R3, so I've been doing CGI since like 2001. So the spheres is what I'm comfortable with, and that's what I'm used to. So I don't use slate mode. So anytime I open up a fresh install of Max, I click the modes, compact material editor. This is just my workflow. It's very personal preference. There's no right or wrong here, I believe, because it all does the same thing. It's just how you want to see it. So if you click this little icon here, it's like a magic wand in Photoshop for color selection. You click on an object in here and it selects the car paint, or really anything, any material that you click on, it'll select it if there is a material assigned. But if you create a brand new object from scratch, so like let's say I create a box and there's no material assigned to it, if you try to do a magic wand, it just doesn't show up, and that's why, because there's no material on it. So we have our car paint. There's various ways to create car paint materials. You could do it the traditional way where, so if you click on like the word standard legacy, so you go to like materials, the V-Ray. So in a nutshell, I'll go over these as well. So most of these, there's a lot of documents on this. Again, look it up. But for me, for the materials that I usually create, it's either a V-Ray blend material. I use V-Ray car paint material as well. And then V-Ray light material I use. That's like a light source, but material properties. And then you have your standard V-Ray material. This is kind of like the foundation of making any material you want. So let's say you want to create a car paint the traditional route where you try to recreate it the realistic way. So you have your base coat, your maybe metallic flakes, and then your clear coat. So we'll do a V-Ray blend material. And again, this is very rough. So for the base material, I'm just going to do V-Ray material. And we'll just make it like a dark red. And then for reflection, okay, so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So when you create a V-Ray material, you have several properties. You have your diffuse, your reflection, your refraction, and self-illumination. This is a really nice one too. There's other things in here. There's like the coat parameters, which is like a clear coat. So there's different ways to create materials. In a nutshell, reflection is exactly what it is. It's a reflection from 0 to 100 or 255, whatever the value is, a max. I just say 100 because that's pure all the way to the right. It's as reflective as it gets, as black as it gets. Now, as you see, when we go full reflection, it's not representing a chrome ball. And that's because we have this Fresnel reflections. If you uncheck this, now you got a pure chrome material. So I usually just leave this on, and if I want more reflective properties, I uncheck Fresnel IR and bump this up to like 8, 4, whatever it is. So that's that. Now let's say you want to create like a metallic red. So what we'll do is for the reflection, we'll change it from white to a red because we want our reflective properties to be red. We'll make our diffuse even darker red. So as you can see, now we have very dark diffuse and a nice cherry kind of red. But of course, this is like a clear coat chrome wrap type of deal, and that's not what we want. So glossiness is, in basic words, how crisp or soft your reflective elements are. So let's say we take this to 0.5. See, it spreads all over the sheet metal. So now we have like a satin red. So let's do 0.6. I just wanted to kind of like fall off where the lights are. So 0.65. And again, this is just you experimenting and finding what works for you and what you like. So this is our base coat. Now let's say we want flakes. There's many ways to do car paint flakes. You could do an alpha map. I'm gonna just try to throw this on here, and it's the Vray flake material, and see what happens. So see, it just threw some flakes on the car. So that's what I'm gonna leave for the moment. So we'll just do like bright red flakes. And I'm not really going to dial it in too much because this is not a tutorial on how to create a car paint. This is just, or yeah, it's not. It's just a basics of V-Ray, but there's all these settings and you just play with them and figure out what works, what doesn't work, scale, all that good stuff. So for flake density, I'll just change it to like 2. I don't need a lot of flakes. I'm not looking for a bass boat. And then for flake size, maybe I'll just take it halfway down just so they're there but not obnoxious. And now, but last but not least, is our clear coat. So we'll make another V-Ray material. Our diffuse is now going to be pitch black. I'm going to uncheck Fresnel reflections, and I want a nice chrome finish. There we go. And now in the V-Ray blend, you have these two things. You have these color swatches here, and then you have your percentage values. This is like your alpha blend mode. Right now where it starts, it's kind of like, I would say neutral, 50%. If you change it to black, this is not going to be having flakes anymore. If you change it to pure white, it's going to be a pure override. So it'll be better to show you with this chrome. So if I make this pure black, we have no more clear coat. If I make it pure white, we have nothing but this material visible. So for this, because I am going to make the clear coat with alpha, I'm making it pure black. And now I'm going to change this to general fall off. And here, change it to Fresnel. And there we go. So there's our clear coat. Now let's say you did this. There's 2 ways to dial back the clear coat. You could either go in here and tone down this color, or if you just want to do it out here, you could change this percentage to like 50, and that'll only apply 50% of this material. Now, here's the important part. If you have a value here of, let's say 50, but then you have a color here that's not black, this starts to override this value. It's kind of annoying, but that's just how V-Ray is, and it's been like that since day one. So that's why my workflows, I usually, if I'm using an alpha, I just make this black. So that way, if I adjust this value, it doesn't change it. So for example, if I make this pure white, you're going to see the clear coat change. Because now it's going 100% white with only 50%. It's just like 75% now, if you will. It's a bizarre thing. So if you do pure black, then it's easy to control alpha and how much percent of the alpha is used. So there we go. That is a basic car paint. Now we'll just do a basic rubber or plastic and kind of end it there. And then if people have requests, I could make more. But again, this isn't necessarily how to make materials tutorial. It's the basics of V-Ray. Oh, and then I'll switch over some light setups. So this one's carbon, but I'm not going to do carbon. I'm just going to make it a plastic. So same thing. I'm going to do V-Ray material. I'm going to make the diffuse pretty dark. I'm going to bump up the reflective properties. And now I'm just, for glossiness, maybe like 0.5, 0.6. So there you go. That's in a nutshell a rubber. Now you could go crazy. You could start adding maps into like the glossiness slots and really add in wear and tear imperfections. But in a nutshell, that's a quick rubber. So now let's say, okay, this is great, but how do I quickly start seeing my car in an environment? Like I don't want to do studio lighting. I just want to have some fun and just render some stuff. Especially considering you could buy models already prepped in V-Ray ready to go. It's just a matter of you having the fun stuff. So we're going to create a new light source, a dome, and you just click it in spot. So usually, especially if you want to do a HDRI that creates like a world around you, you want to place it right in the middle of the car so it's like grounded. So there we go. We have our HDRI, and HDRIs are always set at 1. I go to 30. That's just, again, my workflow, because then I adjust the material properties of the HDRI. So see where it says map. this is where you put in your HDRI map. So you click that, and you have to use Vray bitmap, not the standard bitmap. So then this window pops up. You just go to your HDRI of your choice. So for example, I'm going to use this one. And this is just a nice little kind of road out in Antelope Island in Utah. So there's two ways of rotating HDRIs. You could rotate it right here with these values. Or what you could also do is click this button, lock texture to icon. And so now when you rotate the actual HDRI light, the world rotates around you. So there's two ways. In the past, I've had issues where when I would rotate it, it would tweak out with RT on, and then it breaks, and then you got to recreate a light. So I'm not going to do this method for a tutorial just to avoid that risk. I don't know if Vray fixed it or not, but it's been something that has been a problem and has been extremely annoying, especially when you're trying to work with real-time preview. So we have our HDRI. This is great if you're using backplates to render your cars into. So you just make the HDRI invisible, you adjust the placement of the HDRI, and then you have a beautiful reflection and sun shadow system based on the 32-bit HDRI. Now, what if you want to actually use the HDRI as a world? So you don't have to have backplates. This is a very popular style on social media. A lot of concept artists use it, and it just makes for quick renderings. The trick is you have to find HDRIs that are pretty wide and open without a lot of vertical things nearby, so that way you don't have just bizarre giveaways. But what you do is you check this finite dome, and then these settings you kind of play with. But what it does is, if I just zoom out, I'll show you what it does. It creates like a dome of the dome. It's a stupid way to phrase it, but it creates a dome around your element. So we'll go back to the camera's view. So let's say you change the radius and projection height. These are the two values you want to play with now. So let's say radius 100 and then projection height 5. And these, I work in feet, so those are my settings. So now you have your dome. And there we go. And now you just kind of look at it, you're like, okay, this looks good. However, I'm getting all these distortions happening with my image. So this is where you start going in and you start adjusting the values of like the radius and the height until you find a compromise that's like acceptable to get away with. And this is where you start playing with shallow depth of field, things like that to kind of get away with it, and also experimenting with different HDRIs. Like I said, some work better than others, but this is another workflow that works if you want to do quick renders right off the bat. And then, of course, now you have your car, but it's hovering. It's not sitting in an environment, if you will. No ground, nothing. So we'll go to top view, create a plane, just a decent size, especially if you have HDRIs with hard shadows. I'm just going to go to the side view. I'm going to press F3. For wireframe, place this plane underneath the car. Now we have our shadow. Great. However, as you can see, it's a pink or purple, whatever the hell you want to call it, plane. So all you have to do is, with the plane selected, hit this little box right here. It's make Vray shadow catcher through the object. There we go. So now we got a car that's grounded. But this is the one thing Vray has sucked with, and I'm very strong on this because I don't know why they can't get it right. It's very annoying. It's been posted on forums, and they just choose to ignore it. They say, yeah, it works fine. It does not work fine. As you can see, our shadow is very diffuse. It doesn't have that contrast that it had a second ago. So before I get into how to fix that, there's another thing that I usually do. With the plane selected, you right click, you go to Vray properties, you uncheck receive GI. Otherwise, you're going to have some weird artifacts start coming up with more intense lighting situations. So now, okay, the car is there, but the shadows are a little diffused. So what you want to do, and this is a workaround, this is a pathetic workaround because Vray should get their stuff together and fix it, but they choose not to, so I have to find ways to fix it myself. Great. So anyhow, I'm just creating a plane, and this could be a directional plane. It's essentially, I'm representing a light source, like a sun. But as you can see, now that we have a plane in the environment, it's creating reflections and all these things. I don't want that. I just want to be used to ground the vehicle. So all I'm going to do is uncheck Effect Specular, Effect Reflections, and now we just have Diffuse affected. So if you turn it off and you turn it on, you can see the car becomes a lot more grounded. So it is a little crisp, and our environment has kind of a diffused light. So all we have to do is just make the plane larger, or the light source larger. So larger, And then I'm just gonna move it back some, maybe move it closer, and this will diffuse the light. There we go. And then maybe bump down the intensity of it. So as you can see now, the vehicle feels a lot more grounded. Now the other thing that you can do with V-Ray, CR HDRI has a lot of overexposed elements. They're just pure overexposed hotspots. What I usually do is in this right column right here, these are like almost like your curve adjustment, like your effects that you would do in Photoshop. You could do the same thing in V-Ray. So I'm going to click on create new layer. I'm adding an exposure adjustment, and see where it says highlight burn. I just move this to the left and it just brings back some of that information in the HDRI. And that's it. That is how you could quickly ground your vehicle in an HDRI environment, kind of like a 3D quick way to start rendering cars and having fun with it. And other than that, yeah, all the information is out there. There's plenty of YouTube videos. If you want to do very quick data prep, there's I believe it's this right here. There's an actual V-Ray material library that you could literally drag and drop materials from. So this is like a game changer for laziness. And I mean, if it works, it works. It's whatever. But you gotta like download them. So here you could find, like, let's say we want glass. You'll have all kinds of glass options. So here we'll just do like thin glass. We'll click download. There we go. Open material editor. We'll export it. So there's our thin glass. And now I'm just going to right click. I'm going to click copy. I'm going to click the magic wand on this glass. So there we go. I'm going to right click, paste instance. And there we go. We just threw some glass on there. So now let's do the same thing for carbon fiber. So carbon fiber, maybe it's 2 words. Yeah, there you go. They have it. So here we go. Your twill weave. Yeah, we want plain weave. This is the one that's the popular one, I think. I don't know if that's how V-Ray sees it, but so I'm just going to export it. I'm going to right click copy, go on this carbon material, paste instance. There we go. Now we got carbon fiber applied to the car. So this is like a shortcut with data prep where you don't actually have to learn how to really go crazy with creating materials. You could just prep it and go. Now, the one thing I will say is, like, let's say I'm zooming in on this carbon fiber is it's just not looking, it's not showing up. So I'm going to show this material. So we have, all right, I am going to add a UV map to hopefully fix this issue because it's not showing up. So all I did is I click this icon right here, select by material, and click select on everything is selected. And now I'm going to add a modifier called UVW mapping. UVW map, it's not mapping, it's map. So see, now we have a carbon, so I'll go to box mode. And then for the moment, I'll go 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, which is still a bit much. I'm going to do 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. So this is a carbon material from their library. Don't necessarily, doesn't mean it's really all that great. So this is theirs, and I have a large collection of materials that I've made over the years. So this is kind of like my latest carbon fiber that I work from. And the whole point is to really show off the weave and give it more justice and then dial it back from there. But again, this is all personal workflow. You make materials how you like to see them, how they match up to reference, or if you're doing just a concept visual art, you do whatever you want to do. But in a nutshell, that is V-Ray. The quick render settings, quick material adjustments, light creation, HDRI dome setup. And after that, I mean, there's a lot more to it. You could really get carried away with what you can and cannot do. Like, for example, if I want this this grill to be like a neon light, I just do a very light material, make it red. So there we go. And then you could either bump up this value like really crazy, or what you can do is click compensate camera exposure, and that's just going to start it as a base neutral value. So I'll do like a 5, and then here I'll turn on lens effects, and this is now turning it into like a glowy, cool visual effects thing. Oh, last thing I'll show you. This is render passes. So I'm going to delete all these for the moment and kind of give you a rundown of what they are and how to use them. So if you go to this final tab, render elements, there's one that's called multi-matte element. This is your alpha channels, 1, 2, 3, and then these represent either, if you click on the object, go to object properties, it either represents object IDs, which this currently does, or if you check this is matte ID checkbox, it represents this value right here, material ID channel. So typically for me, my car paints are always number 1, then my glass is number 2, so we'll do glass 2, and then my plastics is 3. So for this example, I'll make carbon fiber 3, because carbon for me is typically 10. But anyhow, so there we go. So we have those 3 materials. I'm going to check this is, so now let's say you're like, okay, but I have a lot more I want alphas for. So you add another one, make sure you change the name, otherwise it will overwrite this one when it's saving out the things. So now we go 1, 2, 3, then we do 4, 5, 6, and then you just check this again. But keep in mind, this 3D Max one only goes up to 15. So if you want to use something past 15, Vray has this thing right here. Where was it? I think it's under options. Here we go. So see this? If you click on effect ID, you could change this from 15 to whatever else you want. You can make it 100, 150. So this is where you could go past the standard 15. There we go. So, okay, we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll just select random things. So my little neon thing is going to be 4. My little windows is going to be 5. And then the tires will be 6. Just for example purposes. So there we go. Those are the ways you create alphas. The other thing you could do is Vray Cryptomatte. So we'll do this, and then you could do material IDs, and I'll show you how to use that. Then the other thing that I usually do, because I don't like to do the reflection, refraction, all those passes, I usually do Vray Denoiser, and that might, in a nutshell, be it for my workflow. Again, my workflow only. So Denoiser, what it does is you could render low-res settings, and then Denoiser tries to do its best to filter out noise. So for the default engine, I changed it to Intel Open Image Denoiser. Best thing is I'm running AMDs, and this works just fine. So it's awesome. So there we go. Now what I'll do is go back to Vray Frame Buffer. I click Preview, and the alphas are going to show up. So there we go. So now we have multi-matte element. As you can see, red, green, and blue. Then we have multi-matte element 2, red, green, and blue. We have Cryptomatte. This one's pure hot mess, and I'll show you how to use that here in a second. Then you have Vray Denoiser, which if you go to here, and then let's say you go to Denoiser, you could see what Denoiser is doing. So if you turn it off, see how there's all the grain? I don't know if it's picking up in the footage with me recording the monitor, but it's denoising the thing and making it pretty to the best of its ability. And then the most important is this bump normals. When you add the denoiser, this comes up. And this is so good for post. So you could just color, like adjust exposure and things like that based on normals angles. So, okay, we have this. So this is how you use Cryptomatte. Let's say you want to bump up the car paint and you don't have an alpha for it, or you don't want to create alphas because you just want to do all your adjustments in here and then just save out the final image and call it a day. So what you want to do is, let's say you add a curves adjustment, then we'll just bump this up. I gotta reset this. I don't know what the heck just happened. So reset all. I'll just bump this up. So we're really just pushing the car paint. But as you can see, the curves adjustment did everything. So all you gotta do is click this little icon right here, click Cryptomatte Mask, and then all you do is you click this little picker thing, click on the car paint, and there you go. It added. So if you click this, you can see what it just alphaed out. And there we go. That's a quick way to just do adjustments in here without having to create alphas for every single element, which if you have a lot of materials, this could be a great way to just do some fine tuning without having to do a final like composite, which you could still do, of course. But again, different workflows, different people, different ways of doing stuff. So there's that. I want to say that is the basics. This is the basics of Vray to get started and start having fun. And then you could go down and learn a bunch of other workflows, tips, methods, everything. There's a lot of stuff in V-Ray. I just don't want to focus on that in this tutorial. This is a kind of, I just got it installed. What are the basics to start rendering? And this is it. And then when you're ready to hit render, I believe you could just hit render right here, or you just press F9. And there we go. So this is going to quickly render. As you can see, all these little buckets represent CPU cores. So there's my little render. And there we go. There's a quick render of the car. I'll save this so we could compare this to like a high quality 2 and 12 output and 0.008. Like I said, these are kind of my go to final settings. I'll hit render again, and we'll see how the render times compare to the other one. I'll pause the video for a second. All right, it is done. Let's save this one. So we went from 8 seconds to 42 seconds. So as you can see, bumping up the settings did do quite a bit with render times. But let's do the important thing, compare if it was worth it. This is the 8-second render. This is the 42-second render. As you can see, with denoising, they look almost identical. This one's got a little bit more like, it's more like, I guess you could say like, it's tucked in a little bit more like, really less blurred. I don't know how the best way to phrase it. It's got its stuff together. Let's put it that way. This one's a little bit more gooey on some of these spreading and highlights. But overall, if I was to render something just for myself for a quick little social media post, I wouldn't do it. I would just do like 2 and 6.008. Maybe this one leave at 1. Hit render. These are, again, these are experimental settings. You just keep throwing them in, see what gets you to the finish line within the time frame you prefer. So there's not like a golden rule for you have to use this setting for a final output. So as you can see, this one went through it pretty quick. Let's see. I'll just save this one out just so we can compare the three. So we got 18 seconds here, 45 here. Almost not noticeable. And then 8 seconds, 9 seconds here. So as you can see, quick little adjustments, not much of a difference thanks to Denoiser. Now let's say you turn off Denoiser. This one looks like this. And this one looks really bad. See a lot of little specks everywhere. And then the longest render looks the smoothest, where the glass doesn't have any grain, all that good stuff. So it's the Denoiser that really helps take you to the finish line without a lot of time spent. So in a nutshell, I think I'm done. If anyone has any requests, feedback, opinions, feel free to share. Again, this is a quick little rundown, personal workflow, very subjective to my workflow and my style. Not a right or wrong way to do it. So yeah, feel free to take it, ignore it, whatever you want to do. Not a big deal to me. Hope it helps someone, however.